Dambana was a village blessed with fertile lands, clear rivers, and the warmth of a close-knit community. In this village lived a little girl named Sade, the beloved daughter of Baba Mosi, a respected blacksmith known for his strong hands and kind heart. Her mother, Mama Simi, was just as loved, a gentle woman who filled their home with laughter and warmth. Together, they were a happy family, and Sade's childhood was filled with love and comfort. But happiness is like a fleeting breeze. When Sade was only 7, her world shattered. Mama Simi fell ill, and despite the healer's efforts, she passed away, leaving Sade and her father drowning in sorrow. The once cheerful home turned silent, and Baba Mosi, though strong, carried his grief like a heavy burden. The villagers whispered that he needed a wife to care for Sade and bring life back into his home. So, after some time, he married a woman named Batu, a widow with a daughter of her own, Ifeya. At first, Batu appeared kind. She smiled warmly at Sade, called her my dear child, and promised to be like a mother to her. Baba Mosi, relieved to see his daughter no longer alone, felt at peace with his decision. But as the days turned into weeks, a different side of Batu emerged. The moment Baba Mosi left for work each morning, Batu's smiles disappeared. Her voice turned sharp, and her eyes, once kind, were filled with coldness. "Ifeya is my jewel," she would say, running her fingers through her daughter's hair. "But you are nothing but a burden." At first, Sade did not understand. She thought maybe she had done something wrong. But as time went on, Batu's cruelty became impossible to ignore. She gave Sade the hardest chores, making her scrub the floors, fetch water from the river, and cook meals, while Ifeya sat comfortably, enjoying her mother's affection. If Sade made a mistake, Batu would snap at her, sometimes even slapping her across the face. Sade hoped her father would notice, but Batu was clever. Whenever Baba Mosi was around, she transformed into the perfect wife. She treated Sade gently, served Baba Mosi with love, and spoke sweetly, making sure he never suspected the truth. And so, Sade suffered in silence, her once happy home becoming a place of misery and pain. As the years passed, Batu's hatred for Sade grew stronger. She could not stand the way Sade carried herself with quiet grace, nor could she bear to see how the villagers spoke fondly of her kindness. Even with all the suffering Batu put her through, Sade remained gentle and patient, never speaking ill of anyone. But what angered Batu the most was Sade's beauty. Even after long days of endless chores, her dark skin glowed under the sun, and her deep brown eyes shone with warmth. Ifeya, on the other hand, was spoiled and selfish. Yet Batu saw her as the only one worthy of admiration. "Ifeya is my jewel," Batu would say proudly, running her fingers through her daughter's thick hair, while Ifeya sat lazily in the courtyard. Then, turning to Sade, her face would twist with disgust. "But you are nothing but a burden." Sade was forced to wake up before dawn every morning. She swept the compound, fetched heavy pots of water from the river, and pounded yam until her arms ached. While Ifeya lay in bed, Sade was in the kitchen, her hands covered in soot as she cooked meals for the entire family. When she made a mistake, even a small one, Batu would lash out, her voice sharp like a blade. "Are you useless as well as ugly?" she snapped one day, when Sade spilled a little water while serving porridge. "You are lucky I even let you stay in this house." Ifeya, watching from the corner, smirked but said nothing. She enjoyed seeing Sade suffer, especially when it meant she could live in comfort without lifting a finger. Sade endured it all, holding on to hope that her father would notice her pain. But Baba Mosi, tired from long hours at the forge, saw only what Batu allowed him to see. The moment he stepped through the door, Batu changed. She spoke softly, pretending to care for Sade. She even made small gestures of kindness in front of him, placing food on Sade's plate, or asking if she was tired after a long day. "My husband, our little Sade is growing into such a hard-working girl," she would say sweetly, casting a sideways glance at Sade as if daring her to say otherwise. Sade wanted to speak the truth, to tell her father about the beatings, the insults, and the hunger she endured when Batu purposely gave her less food. But she saw how happy Baba Mosi was, how much he trusted Batu, and she swallowed her words. Instead, she whispered to herself at night, "One day, things will be better." But deep down, she was beginning to wonder if that day would ever come. As the years went by, Sade blossomed into a young woman. Despite all the hardships she faced, she carried herself with quiet dignity. Her beauty was striking, not just in the way she looked, but in the kindness that shone through her every action. She had warm, deep brown eyes filled with gentleness, a smile that could melt even the hardest hearts, and a spirit that refused to break. The villagers began to notice her more. Young men stole glances at her as she walked through the marketplace, their eyes filled with admiration. Some even spoke to their parents about seeking her hand in marriage. Though Sade never let these things get to her head, Batu saw it all, and her jealousy burned like a raging fire. Ifeya, despite being pampered and spoiled, was ignored. No one spoke of her beauty or praised her the way they did Sade. Batu couldn't stand it. How could the girl she despised, the one she had tried to break, still shine brighter than her own daughter? Batu's hatred grew into something dangerous. She realized that as long as Sade had her beauty, she would always be noticed, and so she came up with a cruel plan, one that would ensure Sade would never outshine Ifeya again. One evening, while Baba Mosi was away on a long trip, Batu called Sade into the kitchen. She wore an unusual smile, her voice softer than usual. "Come closer, my child," she said sweetly. "Let me see you properly." Sade hesitated. Batu had never spoken to her this kindly before, but deep inside, Sade longed for motherly affection, so she stepped forward. Then, without warning, Batu grabbed a burning log from the fire. Before Sade could react, she pressed it against her face. A piercing scream filled the night air as Sade collapsed, clutching her burning skin. The pain was unbearable, a fiery torment that spread through her body like poison. Batu stood over her, her lips curling into a wicked smile. "Now no one will look at you again," she sneered. Ifeya stood in the corner, her face pale with shock, but she said nothing. She did not stop her mother, nor did she try to help Sade. By the time the village healer arrived, the damage was done. Though he did his best to soothe her wounds, the scars remained. The once flawless face that had drawn admiration was now marred by cruel burns. When Baba Mosi returned, Batu had already crafted a story. She wept fake tears, telling him that Sade had been careless and fallen into the fire while cooking. Baba Mosi was devastated, blaming himself for not being there. Batu, playing the role of a concerned mother, shook her head. "It's a shame," she sighed. "Who will want her now?" Sade sat in silence, her face aching, her heart shattered. She knew the truth, but no one would believe her. And worst of all, she realized that Batu had gotten exactly what she wanted. Time passed, but Sade's spirit remained strong. Though the scars on her face never faded, she refused to let them define her. She continued to work hard, treating everyone with kindness, never allowing Batu's cruelty to break her soul. The villagers, once shocked by her burns, soon realized that Sade's true beauty had never been in her face, it was in her heart. One day, a wealthy merchant's son named Adiro visited the village. He was not only rich, but also well-educated and respected. Unlike many others, Adiro was not drawn to outward beauty alone. He had heard stories of Sade's resilience and wisdom, and was eager to meet her. When he finally did, he was captivated, not by her appearance, but by her gentle nature and sharp mind. While others whispered about her scars, Adiro saw something different. He saw a woman who had suffered, yet still carried herself with dignity. "I have never met anyone like you, Sade," he said one evening, as they sat under the great baobab tree. "Your strength is rare, and your heart is pure. I do not care about the past. I only care about the woman you are." His words melted the last bit of doubt in Sade's heart. For the first time in years, she felt truly seen. When Adiro sent his family to ask for her hand in marriage, the entire village buzzed with excitement. Despite everything, Sade was finally receiving the happiness she deserved. But Batu was furious. The very idea that Sade, the girl she had tried so hard to ruin, would be chosen over Ifeya was more than she could bear. Ifeya, too, was enraged. All her life she had been pampered and told she was the best. Yet here was Sade, still winning despite everything. "No man will choose Sade over Ifeya." Batu spat, her face twisted with jealousy. "I will not let this happen." Determined to stop the wedding, Batu came up with a plan. She met with Adiro's family in secret, telling them that there had been a mistake. "It was never Sade who was meant for your son," she lied, putting on a show of regret. "It was Ifeya all along. The villagers must have confused them. Poor Sade is too damaged to be anyone's wife." She then showed them Ifeya, dressed in her finest clothes, her face painted beautifully. "Surely you can see who is the better match," Batu insisted. Adiro's parents, unfamiliar with Sade and easily deceived by Batu's smooth words, hesitated. Ifeya, standing before them like a perfect bride, seemed like the obvious choice. After much persuasion, they agreed to the switch. The wedding arrangements were changed, and no one informed Adiro. On the morning of the wedding, as the village prepared for the grand ceremony, Batu made her final move. Before Sade could dress for her special day, Batu and Ifeya cornered her. "You will not ruin my daughter's future," Batu hissed. Before Sade could react, she was dragged into a dark storeroom at the back of the house. Batu shoved her inside, locked the heavy wooden door, and walked away without a second glance. As Sade pounded against the door, calling for help, Ifeya was dressed in the bridal garments meant for her. She smiled in satisfaction, ready to take Sade's place at the altar. The wedding ceremony was grand, with the entire village gathered to witness the union. Drummers played joyous rhythms, women danced, and children laughed as the celebration filled the air. Adiro, dressed in fine robes, stood proudly at the front, waiting for his bride to be presented to him. His heart was full of anticipation. He had chosen Sade not because of her past, but because of the woman she had become. He was ready to spend his life with her. At last, the bride was led forward, her face hidden beneath a delicate veil. The crowd murmured in admiration, unaware of the deception unfolding before them. Batu and Ifeya stood nearby, barely able to contain their excitement. Everything was going according to plan. Adiro reached out and gently lifted the veil, eager to finally see the woman he loved. But the moment his eyes fell on the face before him, he froze. The murmurs in the crowd turned to gasps. This was not Sade. "You are not Sade," Adiro exclaimed, his voice sharp with shock and confusion. Ifeya's smile wavered. She tried to hold his gaze, but Adiro had already stepped back, his face dark with anger. The village elders, sensing something was wrong, demanded an explanation. "What is the meaning of this?" one of them asked sternly. Batu, quick to recover, forced a smile. "It is just a misunderstanding," she said smoothly. "Surely, Adiro, you can see that Ifeya is just as beautiful, just as worthy." "Enough," Adiro interrupted, his patience snapping. "I did not choose Ifeya. I chose Sade." His eyes searched the crowd, looking for the woman he had promised to marry. "Where is she?" At that moment, the doors to the compound burst open. Sade stood in the entrance, her breath heavy, her dress slightly torn, but her spirit unbroken. The entire village turned to her, their shock turning to whispers as they realized what had happened. Batu and Ifeya had locked her away, attempting to replace her with deceit. The elders stepped forward, their faces grim. "This is a great betrayal," one of them declared. "You have shamed not only this family but the entire village." Batu tried to protest, but no one listened. Ifeya, humiliated, kept her eyes on the ground, unable to face the anger of the villagers. Adiro walked past them and stood before Sade. "I choose you, Sade," he said, his voice firm and unwavering. "Not lies, not deception, only you." The crowd erupted in cheers, celebrating Sade's triumph. Batu and Ifeya, once so proud, now stood alone, shunned by the very people they had tried to deceive. The village had spoken. Deception had no place among them, and the punishment for their betrayal was clear: disgrace and exile. Batu and Ifeya's disgrace spread throughout the village like wildfire. No one wanted anything to do with them. Once, Batu had walked with her head high, treating others with arrogance, believing she was untouchable. Now, she and her daughter were outcasts, whispered about in every home. With no allies left, Batu became bitter. She could not accept defeat. She blamed Sade for everything, convincing herself that if not for the girl, she would still be respected. She tried to seek revenge, plotting in secret, but her attempts always failed. The gods seemed to be watching, ensuring that she could never harm Sade again. Then, the worst happened. A terrible drought fell upon the land. The rivers dried up, crops withered, and food became scarce. The village suffered, but because of Sade and Adiro's kindness and wisdom, they had prepared for hard times. Their home was always filled with food, and they shared with those in need. The villagers respected them more than ever. Batu and Ifeya, however, were not so lucky. With no friends and no one willing to help them, they struggled to survive. Hunger gnawed at their bellies, and their fine clothes became rags. Ifeya, who had once lived in luxury, now knew the sting of true suffering. One night, as the hunger became unbearable, Batu made a desperate decision. She waited until the village was asleep and crept towards Sade's home. The scent of warm food drifted through the air, making her stomach twist in pain. She moved like a shadow, sneaking toward the storage hut, her hands trembling with anticipation. If she could just steal a little food, she thought, they might survive another day. But as she reached for a sack of grain, a voice rang out, "Stop!" Batu froze. She turned slowly and saw Sade standing in the doorway, holding a lantern. Her eyes, once filled with innocence, now burned with quiet strength. Batu wanted to speak, to beg, but before she could, Sade took a step forward. "You once burned me with fire," Sade said, her voice calm, yet powerful. "But now, the fire of karma has burned your life." Batu fell to her knees, trembling. The villagers had begun to wake, drawn by the commotion. Soon, the elders arrived, their faces grim. Batu had not only betrayed the village once, but now she had tried to steal from the very person she had wronged. "There is no place for you here," the elders declared. "You and your daughter will leave Dambana at once." Batu and Ifeya begged for mercy, but their cries fell on deaf ears. The villagers turned their backs on them, just as Batu had once turned her back on Sade. With nowhere to go, Batu and Ifeya were forced to wander into the wilderness, where they roamed as outcasts, suffering the very misery they had once wished upon Sade. Life in Dambana flourished under Sade and Adiro's kindness and wisdom. Their love only grew stronger with each passing day. Adiro adored Sade, not for her beauty, but for her strength, intelligence, and the kindness that had never wavered, even in the face of cruelty. He saw beyond the scars, and soon, so did everyone else. At first, people still whispered about Sade's face, but over time, their whispers changed. They no longer spoke of her scars with pity, but with admiration. They saw them as proof of her resilience, a reminder that she had survived what was meant to break her. The young women of the village looked up to her, inspired by her courage. Mothers told their daughters her story, not as a tale of tragedy, but as one of strength and triumph. Sade did not let her past define her, nor did she let it make her bitter. Instead, she used her experience to help others. She gathered the women of Dambana and taught them the importance of self-worth and justice. She encouraged them to be strong, to speak up, and to never allow themselves to be treated unfairly. She reminded them that they were more than their looks, more than what society expected them to be. With time, Sade became one of the most respected women in the village. Even the elders sought her advice, valuing her wisdom. She and Adiro worked together to make Dambana a better place, ensuring that no one else would suffer as she once had. Though the scars on her face remained, they no longer mattered. What people saw now was the woman she had become, a woman who had turned pain into power, suffering into strength, and betrayal into victory. Many years passed, and Dambana continued to prosper under Sade and Adiro's leadership. The village was peaceful, and Sade had built a life filled with love and respect. She had long moved on from the pain of her past, but the scars, both on her face and in her heart, remained as a reminder of where she had come from. One evening, as the sun dipped behind the hills, a frail, ragged figure stumbled into the village. Her clothes were torn, her body thin and weak. Her once proud face was now sunken with age and suffering. It was Batu. The villagers gasped when they recognized her. The same woman who had once ruled with cruelty and arrogance was now nothing more than a shadow of her former self. Ifeya was nowhere to be seen. Batu had been left alone, abandoned by the very daughter she had once favored over all else. With trembling hands, she approached Sade's home. Her voice was weak as she called out, "Sade, my child, please." Sade stepped outside, her eyes calm as she looked upon the woman who had caused her so much pain. There was no hatred in her heart, only pity. Batu fell to her knees, tears streaming down her weathered face. "I have nothing left," she wept. "I was wrong. I was blinded by jealousy and pride. I have suffered, Sade. Please, forgive me." The villagers watched in silence, waiting to see what Sade would do. Many of them would have turned Batu away, just as she had once turned Sade away. But Sade was not like her. She had learned that true strength was not in revenge, but in mercy. Without a word, Sade went inside and returned with a small bowl of food. She placed it in front of Batu. "Eat," she said softly. Batu, overwhelmed, sobbed as she took the food in her shaking hands. But when Batu looked up again, Sade's expression was firm. "I will not turn you away in hunger," she said, "but I will never welcome you back into my life. The pain you caused me shaped who I am today, but in the end, it destroyed you." Batu lowered her head, shame washing over her like a heavy storm. She knew there was no place for her in Dambana anymore. She had spent her life tearing others down, and now there was no one left to hold her up. She left the village that night, disappearing into the wilderness. No one saw her again. Some say she wandered until she could walk no more. Others say she died alone, haunted by the face of the girl she had once tried to destroy. But in the end, it was not Sade's scars that defined the story. It was Batu's regret.